Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, the Trump appointments, continue at the steady clip. Interestingly, he still hasn't named a Treasury Secretary. I mean, he's filled most of the jobs, but the big jobs. But he hasn't named a Treasury Secretary, and there seems to be speculation. Well, not even speculation. There's not evidence that there's or some crisis or some disagreement among Trump advisors as to who the Treasury Secretary should be. So Elon Musk is advocating for one person, and then somebody others are advocating for somebody else. So that's on the back burner.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that Elon Musk's name would be mentioning even Saturday Night Live, which I accidentally saw on my YouTube feed, and they had the meeting of they had a mock meeting of Biden and Trump, and Elon Musk kept being brought up. I mean, it was very interesting. Who would have thought?
It's very interesting because when he took over Twitter, the conventional view was, and we shared it. Whoa, that's a big mistake. He's paid $44 billion. It's nowhere near worth $44 billion. But whoa, what it's given him! I mean, he's really elevated his public persona. I mean, he was barely known outside of people who knew this whole geek world of IT and everything. It was people, oh yeah, PayPal, and they knew something about PayPal, and knew a little bit about SpaceX, but he was
And then
hardly
there
a
was,
known
a few
personality.
years ago, he got high on something, and he had this really weird string of tweets. But it was always kind of received as just another one of these kind of brilliant but kind of kooky
Right.
billionaires, and he was just kind of in that category.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But he didn't have anything like the profile of other billionaires, the Bill Gates or Zuckerberg, or these were well-known billionaires, or Soros. So Musk was really outside of a kind of a very narrow esoteric world, was hardly known. He took over Twitter, and that really took off. So it's a good investment for him. I mean, he may have overpaid. It wasn't worth anything like 44 billion, but it was worth a lot of money to him to become a kind of a global figure, much reviled, but nonetheless, he's now a global figure.
And I don't want to be play Monday morning quarterback, but my gut tells me that if the election result had gone the other way, Elon Musk would be looking at a very bleak
Very big.
future.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
very, very bleak. Exactly.
his the ownership or even existence
Right,
of Twitter.
right, right.
Okay,
No,
and as we've always pointed out here, heavily dependent on government
yeah,
contracts. So that too could have been easily endangered.
very
Okay.
much so. Very, very much so. Oh, they would have definitely gone after him. And this was Rachel Maddow was actually advocating that we need to go after him. He's a danger. He's a danger to national security. And she was advocating. Yeah, that's we have to absolutely cut him off. The U.S. government needs to just completely cut him off. So there was no question he would have been targeted. Now he's taking part in all the meetings, all of the appointments. He takes part and advocates for one person rather than another. But the issue we're still talking about is this this national security team. And when we look at them, we've got Rubio as Secretary of State. We've got Mike Waltz as the National Security Advisor, and there's still speculation that his deputy is going to be Dr. Sebastian Gorka, which is kind of mind-boggling. And then we've got Pete Hegseth as at defense, and so when we and then of course we have these appointments like Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel. Certain conclusions we can draw from that. I mean, yeah, I mean, true, Trump is going to set policy, and Trump is mercurial. and he does fire people who don't who are not on his wavelength. However, if one were to think about, well, what would we expect from this team? Would we expect them to take a very strong, a harsh pro-Israel line? They say, yeah, that's what we would expect. I mean, it's like, would we expect them to suddenly say, they're going to put an ultimatum to Netanyahu? No, you bring this thing to an end, or we cut off arms. That's not what you would expect from this team.
Yeah, but I mean, it's we could get into a very weird conversation or observe a very bizarre conversation of who cares more about Israel. Because I think we're moving in that direction. I mean, for Huckabee, a cartoonish, buffoonish character.
Kind of likable. He has a sort of
Very,
personality.
likable big man. Okay.
Yeah.
Very affable.
Yeah.
I mean, really, retail politics, this guy knows. Okay.
Yeah.
But for someone like this Elise Stefanik and Huckabee, Hegseth, Israel is kind of an idea.
Yep.
Okay. And then when they see Israel is in peril, I mean, let's be serious here. Okay. And they're going to say, hey, this is really the metal is hitting the road right now. Okay. And I think that there's a possibility you might step back and say, Bibi, do you think you really need to do this? Okay. Because it's hurting Israel, the country we all love, the only thing we have in common. Okay. I know that's kind of way out there in the weeds, but it's crossing my mind.
But this is really where it gets interesting, because if you have these figures who are absolutely the most fanatical pro-Israeli, I mean, this is you are talking about people who whose belief is based on the gift God gave to Abraham. God gave this land to Abraham. That's the way they're thinking about this the situation in Palestine. That's their mentality. God gave this to Abraham, and therefore we are fulfilling some biblical vision. I mean, you think, well, who the hell thinks about foreign policy in that way? But that's the way some of these people. Hegseth thinks like that. Certainly Huckabee thinks like that. I don't know about Stefanik. Maybe Stefanik thinks like that. That's where he gets into a very dangerous area. And Trump has said that he wants Netanyahu to finish things off. Now, he's never spelled out, what do you mean by finishing things off? But it can't be anything good. And then, you think, well, if you're going to give a blank check, it's hard to say, well, where does that, what is it you want him to do?
You've got to hope that somebody is taken Trump aside and just said to him, yeah, you want things to be finished up. What does that mean? And if it's not finished the way you expect, which nobody understands what that means, you could be saddled with this day one. It's going to be your war. And, and as George and I have said repeatedly, he has a very, look, the House, the Senate, and the White House. It doesn't happen very often, everyone. It doesn't happen often. As a matter of fact, a lot of Americans like kind of an adversarial balance, okay? But this is like the stars have lined up for him remarkably, okay? And, and you want to, how are you going to apportion your time and your energy? Okay? Because when you've got all three, you can change the future. You can, or it'll make it very hard to unchange it. Okay. If you are laser focused, but if you're going to be focusing on, well, God gave this land to Abraham. I mean, if you're going to be in that discourse, I just have to wonder what your priorities are going to be. And plus, for many people in the Democratic Party, this could be really interesting because the Democratic Party, it's roadkill right now. I mean, it's catastrophic what they've done to themselves. Okay. but they could latch on to Palestine now, and there's something that could galvanize them. Okay, which believe me, everyone, there are many, many people in the Democratic Party felt exactly that way, and they put their head in the sand. Okay, because you can't let Trump in. I mean, okay, I'm willing to accept genocide, even
Right.
genocide, because I hate the Orange Man. That's
Right.
how. That's
No,
how
I absolutely agree. I think this is if Trump does go down this path, this gives a real opening for the Democrats. Now they're going to be able to all unite together with the genocide Don routine and say, yeah, look what's happening now. And there will be, shedding crocodile tears about the horrors being inflicted on innocent women and children in Gaza. Blame it on Trump. That's it. They can absolutely unleash. And even those who are very passionately pro-Israel, like Chuck Schumer, he said, yeah, absolutely. This is horrific. I mean, God,
Yeah,
I'm
because it's
weeping every time I
destroying
watch
Israel.
television.
It's destroying Israel. That's what someone like Schumer will say. Plus, George, it's going to, and now everybody buckle up and wait for impact because we're going to see a flip in a major way. With these, Mike Johnson and others, they want congressional legislation controlling speech. The Democrats, they were going to be the party of free speech because obviously what Mike Johnson and others are proposing is fundamentally anti-constitutional. I mean, you don't even you could watch Perry Mason and figure this out. Okay, you don't need a law degree to figure this one out. It's just fundamentally against U.S. law and tradition,
Right.
and that's going to be the domestic opening for the Democrats. The foreign policy one will be the genocide. This
Right.
this is the only path they can go. They can
I,
they because
I,
wokeism was a bust for them.
right.
They've abandoned the middle class. That's a bust for them. Okay. What do they have? What do they have? What they have is very lockstep minded cadres.
Right.
Okay. That's the only thing they've got. Yeah, they have a good ground game. Well, they had no message, okay? But now they may have messages and they have the ground game.
No, I agree. Interestingly enough, on the free speech question, the one congressman who was very strongly opposed to the this codifying this hate speech law, codifying anti-Semitism, was actually Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz said this is absolute. This is a war against free speech. He had nothing. He wanted to have nothing to do with the other Republicans who wanted to pass this hate speech legislation. So that'll be interesting if he does become attorney general, whether he's going to stick with that line and saying, hey, we can't possibly violate the First Amendment, which of course it does. But you're absolutely right. This will give the Democrats an opening that they had craved because they're going to be able to mobilize their base, all the people who were very unhappy about the Biden-Harris policy on Palestine. They can now unite. Yeah, this is
And
absolutely horrific
and
what she's doing here.
and the stratagem is it could be brilliant if it's acted upon because if you look at public opinion polls on the issue of Palestine and the genocide, it has a plurality. Obviously, people that identify with the left is far more so, but there are others that are independents, and there are some Republicans out there saying this is not what we're about. Okay, and this is a way to expand their tent. Okay, and particularly if you have some, and we don't know, George. I mean, I think we're all waiting for it. Glenn Greenwald's waiting for it. We're waiting for it. What are they going to do? Why are they holding back? Because and I'll be honest with you, George and I thought the country would blow up,
Right.
but the win was so overwhelming. Now they're receding, and they're going to. I think they're having the conversation we're having right now.
I think that gives them an opening, which they will exploit. But the problem is, again, if you say to Netanyahu, "Well, you're going to finish this off," well, there's no real easy way for him to finish anything off, because the logic would be, okay, well, drive out the Palestinians from Gaza, just denude the population. But there's no real opening there. President Sisi of Egypt has refused. He has consistently refused to open Sinai to the Palestinians. I think he's going to stick with it. I don't think there's nothing in it for him to allow Israel to drive out the Palestinians into Sinai. I don't think he's going to
Well, and then
agree to it.
then it'll be a Palestinian crisis in the Sinai in sovereign.
Exactly. So what is
Why
this?
would why does he
Exactly.
want
Why
that?
would he do that? That's exactly same with the king of Jordan. He's not going to do it. I mean, again, he doesn't need that. He doesn't want hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in his. I mean, he's already got enough
Oh, already,
Palestinians in his
but the
territory.
majority of Jordanians are Palestinians.
Exactly. It's
George,
not.
George, finish it off. Let's
That's
put
right.
on our thinking cap here.
That's right. So that's
I'm thinking this is what Netanyahu is going to do, and I think Trump will bite. Finishing it off means the U.S. recognizes sovereignty over the West Bank. Okay. What Netanyahu, I mean, even Gallant, he said there's nothing left to do in Gaza, meaning, except for kill people. Okay. I mean, there's no infrastructure left. There's no
right.
way to live. It's misery. It's a slow death at this point. Okay. And what Netanyahu is going to want is, maybe, yeah, north of Gaza, they have the beachfront condominiums for Jews from New York and New Jersey and Florida and the West Bank. Okay, which will involve its own form of ethnic cleansing.
But again, I mean, you could say ethnic cleansing, but where do they go? Where do you drive them to? I mean, there's nowhere to go. So what would the annexation? I mean, what they could try to do is not the entirety of the West Bank. They could just annex a part of the West Bank, the annex those parts that are just the settlements.
Yeah, but isn't it really the same thing?
Well, I mean, they're not going to annex those parts that are inhabited by Palestinians. They'll just
Yeah,
annex the
okay.
settlements.
I'll split the baby with you. What is important in the West Bank and make sure that is unviable for the remaining Palestinians. What I'm just saying is that the deal that may be in play here, where the genocide is over, it's not going to be over for a very long time, no matter what happens here. What I'm just trying to say is that there's a way that I just don't think Trump is going to watch what it did to the Biden administration.
Right.
Does he really want to get, saddle that horse? I mean, I may be wrong,
Right.
okay, but maybe George and I underestimate the intense fanaticism of these
Right.
people.
There's a but annexation of the settlements. That's a huge headache. Remember, Netanyahu had proposed that during Trump's first term. Trump had vetoed that idea. So instinctively, Trump knew that this is a bad idea. This will be bad for the United States if it signs on to the essentially kind of Israeli annexation of the West Bank settlements. So you have to wonder again. Yeah, you got these fanatics, and they've been very nice to Trump. But hey, he's going to be president. He's going to be the one who's carrying the can for this policy. And so and he remembers, what Israel. He was going to the assassination of Soleimani. He's the one who carried the can. They push
Yeah.
him into it. Hey, yeah. Go ahead. We're right behind you. And then they scalp her. And that's always that the Israeli strategy. I mean, the Israeli strategy is to get somebody else to do, namely the United States, to do the fighting for them. I think it's like Norman Finkelstein says, the Israelis don't have an army. The Israelis have an air force. They don't really want an army because they don't actually want to do any fighting. They can just bomb and pulverize and destroy. That they can do, and that's why it's the usefulness of the United States.
Well,
So that again is still on the cards that the Trump will be maneuvered into some kind of into a fight with Iran.
yeah, I mean, will Huckabee be listened to? We have no idea. Okay. But he doesn't even believe there's an occupation. He
No,
doesn't
no,
believe that there are
no.
settlements. They're called communities.
That's right.
Okay.
No,
There's no such thing as a Palestinian.
no.
I mean, okay, Mike Huckabee is just a outlier. George and I have known about this character for a very long time. Okay, it's like Ben Shapiro. You know, he can talk about marginal tax rates. He can talk about immigration. He can talk about wokeism and all that. And then when it comes to Israel, you know, people like George and I just like, okay, that Ben, that's just your thing. Okay, that's just your thing. Okay, and I would just turn it off. I mean, I didn't listen to it. But if he did talk about, you know, a conversation with Tucker Carlson was kind of interesting. Okay,
Right,
but they never talked about these issues.
right,
Okay,
right.
but if Mike Huckabee is a preview of what others believe, then
No, but it's a really is an interesting question because yes, we got Huckabee, then you got Hegseth. Hegseth is again is a nut. I mean, he's an absolute nut on this issue.
he
Um,
has a kind of a Cliff Notes interpretation of the Old Testament.
yeah, yeah, that's right. And you know, with all these tattoos, with some of his things, um, but on the other hand, then, you know, to be, you know, be fair to Trump, you know, without wanting to prejudge anything ahead, you know, there are other voices around him. I mean, Tucker Carlson obviously has some kind of an influence on Trump. I can't believe Tucker Carlson would tell Trump, hey, you know, that's not a bad idea to go and annex the West Bank settlements. I think you know, he would be definitely against anything like that. I can't believe Elon Musk would sign on to something like that, or you know, or Don Jr. So yeah, you've got this ambassador, who's yeah, you know, the U.S. ambassador, you know, Huckabee. You got Hegseth. But you kind of wonder, well, what about the others? So you know, there
Yeah,
may be more sensible voices in who urge Trump to not to go down this path.
yeah, but I mean, you know, Trump gave away something he had no right to give away, but he did it anyway. The Golan Heights,
Yeah,
and I've always explained that is that, you know, what's it to me, the Golan Heights? What's it to me?
yeah,
Well, where's the political downside? Okay,
right,
they want it. All I have to do is sign a piece of paper, and we say it's theirs.
right,
I mean, that's the kind of transactional thing, you know. And then they'll give me money for my next campaign.
yeah,
That's the transaction there. That's what he
yes,
thought. Did he think about the geopolitical implications of what that means? I doubt it. Okay. And even if it was explained to him, he said, but I don't, for me, politically, there's no downside. That's how he would see it.
yeah,
And, you know, if you want the West Bank, okay. But then a real Secretary of Defense will say, but okay, if we agree that that's Israeli sovereignty and we have this special security relationship with Israel, are we going to protect these settlements
yeah.
in this annexed area? Is that going to be part of our security writ? I mean, now it starts getting complicated.
Right. No, I agree. I agree with you. I think that when you get to Trump, and really when you get to essentially American leaders in general, they think, well, what's the downside for us? I mean, that's why, you know, when we looked at Ukraine, and we always said for the Americans, you know, this is not a bad situation. Americans aren't getting killed. Americans are making money. Others are getting killed. Ukrainians and Russians are getting killed. So it's not a bad deal for the United States. So even if, you know, they think of West Bank, well, what's it to you? I mean, it's not American territory. You know, Israel takes it. Okay, you know, fine. So I think that would be a strong argument, you know, persuading Trump. I mean, you know, there'll be contrary arguments. You know, that, you know, there's a lot of dangers involved there. He did, after all, say no in his first term. He obviously didn't think that was such a great idea, even though he was then running for re-election, but he still didn't sign off on it. But maybe, you know, it's possible that he'll agree to it this time. We just have to see in terms of
We just have to see. I mean, I don't think, you know, let's kind of scratch our heads here. I can't think of an incoming administration where there's so many huge open questions like this. Okay, really,
right.
it could go in so many different ways. Again, you know, we said earlier in my program, the two things that come to mind immediately with these appointments is loyalty to Trump and Israel firsters. Okay,
Right. That well, that's
we've never really kind of seen this before.
no, and it's
I
very
mean, and
interesting.
it doesn't necessarily just have to be with Israel. I mean, like anti-Soviet first, okay, you know, something like that. I mean, we really haven't seen anything quite like this.
No, that's right. But so far, and this is why it's a little troubling, because we haven't had appointments of people who take a contrary view. I mean, let's say Jimmy Carter, he appoints kind of an establishment liberal as Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance, and then he appoints this Cold War hawk, Zbigniew Brzezinski, as national security advisor, and then basically, well, let them fight it out. And they did spend the next 4 years fighting it out. And then, Reagan, to a certain extent, also had that. He had these hawks as national security advisors, but then he had George Shultz, a very kind of fairly reliable Republican establishment type, as a Secretary of State. But so far, the people he's hired are pretty much singing from the same sheet. I mean, you haven't. I mean, you haven't heard if he had said, okay, well, I'm going to appoint Douglas McGregor as deputy national security advisor. So, okay, well, that'll be interesting. We'll see, how that's going to play out. But it doesn't sound like that's what he's doing.
Well, what makes it kind of even more kind of odd is let's pick an issue, arms control. Okay, George and I remember all the white papers and all of the conferences, can you trust the Soviets? Can you to get involved in arms control? But that was a real policy. It was rooted in a kind of even like science, okay? The logic of mutual assured destruction, okay? But in this case, it's more of an ideal, okay? It's like we no daylight between the United States and Israel. What does that mean? That doesn't.
Doesn't
It's
make
an
any. It doesn't mean.
inspiration. It's an emotion. But what does the policy really mean?
Yeah, no, it really isn't. I mean, I think that these people are complete fanatics and believe that the world is united against Israel, that the world is driven by an anti-Semitic hatred for Israel, and that Israel has to be saved from the all the enemies in the world. I mean, that's how they view that somehow the
Could
whole
that include could that include, George, saving Israel from itself? I'm serious.
right.
I'm serious. I think that's what we could get into that kind of conversation. It'd be very weird.
It's yeah, no, exactly. So I mean, it's very interesting that the media have focused their ire on I think what's the most trivial aspects of some of these appointments. So in the case of Pete Hegseth, they're talking about, oh, Hegseth is opposed to women in combat. Well, that's the one thing that I think where Hegseth is quite sensible. I don't think it makes any sense at all
But
to
that's a
have women.
policy.
It's
That's
a
a
policy. It's
policy.
policy. I think the Americans made a huge mistake. I think it was under Obama in putting women into combat. I don't think women belong in combat. I think physically they're limited, and they detract from combat effectiveness because men instinctively seek to protect women. And so instead of trying to destroy your enemy, men are going to be focused on protecting the women who are fighting alongside them. I think that's instinctive. I think it's a bad idea. I think even Israel, I think, doesn't have women in combat roles. Russia doesn't have women in combat roles. You can have women in auxiliary roles, but I think this is the least offensive aspect of Pete Hegseth. But it's typical the media have focused on that, and of course his thing about wokeism and everything, which is again, that's okay, but it's no big deal. You could have found any number of people in that job who also hate wokeism. But what is just obnoxious about him is his fanaticism about a country that is not his own. And you think, how can you be a defense secretary? How can you be in charge of the Pentagon when you're obsessed by a country that is not your own?
Yeah, and if from people that George and I tend to trust, or certainly are willing to listen to, is the Pentagon under Lloyd Austin, it has maybe been a sobering influence when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Israel, Palestine. That might not be there in the Trump administration. But everything goes all the way back to, well, there'll be infighting and all that. Of course, every administration has it. But is um is Trump going to allow another Fauci in his house? Okay.
Right,
But that means it's all going to be on Trump.
right,
Okay. I don't think he's going to let something like that happen again. George and I talked about it in real time. Is that why is he bringing this guy out all the time?
right,
Okay.
right. No, that's right. Um, but the thing is, what happened during his first term, he has, he was maneuvered into firing Michael Flynn. I mean, that was disastrous. Trump really blew it, but he was really inexperienced then. It was clearly powerful forces within the government forced out Flynn. Um, and then, this woman who took over, Katie McFarland, at least briefly until she was pushed out, she hired all these terrible people like Fiona Hill. And suddenly the National Security Council was filled with people who were determined to sabotage anything that Trump sought to do. Fiona Hill, Vindman, and there were all sorts of people like that, who were determined not to enact Trump's agenda. And so, but again, if you're going to have Mike Waltz, well, who's he going to hire? I mean, he's going to hire hawks like himself. He's not going to hire or the people who are going to take a very different view of the world. It's not going to happen. And even if Trump were to say to him, "I want you to hire McGregor. I want McGregor there." Okay, he'll probably hire then McGregor and make sure that McGregor has nothing, no responsibilities, no paperwork, nothing.
Yep,
Just
he won't be CC'd. Okay.
exactly. That's right. So yeah, sure. So that's why you think it's not just the man who's in charge of the National Security Council, but all the people that he's going to hire, and then we're going to be back with all these Fiona Hill.
Well, that's the reason why I brought it up earlier today is can you take on the intelligence community, the deep state, whatever you want to call it? Can you do that? Can a president do that?
Right.
Well, we know that it's very difficult. The record is very bad. Um, and what do they call it? The interagency consensus.
Consensus. Yeah.
Okay. Can you take that on? I don't know. I mean, if you had a political operator like Nixon, I think you could.
Right.
Yeah, I think you could. All right. Jimmy Carter couldn't do it. Ronald Reagan, I think that, there's a debate on that one. Barack Obama, certainly not. Okay,
Right.
George W. Bush, certainly not.
Right.
And,
Right.
and look what happened to Lyndon Johnson. Even if you have a change of heart,
Right.
it's too late.
Yeah. No. That's right. So really, in a way, we kind of then think about, all right, well, we have these hawks. When now, what do we expect from them when it comes to Venezuela? Well, I think they're going to go for regime change.
Yeah.
Marco Rubio, he's been banging on about regime change in Venezuela for years. It would be strange to expect him, not to pursue this policy. Waltz, you would sign on. Against these people are obsessed with Iran. I mean, they've got this whole
Iran on their brain.
Iran on the brain. Then you think, okay, China again. They're all absolutely hawkish on China. So then you get, well, what about Ukraine? And that's always going to be the really interesting one. Now, again, common sense would suggest, well, if they're hawks on this, is it likely that they're not going to be hawkish on that?
Yeah, George, you're absolutely right. And you and I have been watching this from the get-go. Trump didn't like the Ukraine project. So did people just, I mean, right before the podcast, we were talking about Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, we'll talk about transformations. I mean, from a leader of the Democratic Party, okay?
Right.
And now look what's going on with her,
Right.
okay?
Right.
Trump didn't like the Ukraine project.
Right.
Was that a ticket into power?
Right. Right.
Yeah, it looks like to me.
Right.
Because George is right. This is illogical.
Exactly.
How can you be a selective hawk?
Well, exactly, and particularly as these people are absolutely obsessed with Russia. They always have been. You know, some of them are real cold warriors from way back. Rubio with his with his Cuban heritage and everything. So they are obsessed with Russia, and the plans that people talk about. Oh, well, I think Trump will say that this is we should bring this to an end. Um, what they're going to say to Trump? You do realize if we bring this thing to an end, we will have lost. NATO will have lost this war. That's what they're going to tell him. Is that what you want? You want to preside over a NATO defeat? And I find it very difficult that Trump is going to sign on to that. Yeah, I don't want, I don't, it just doesn't make any sense. It isn't like anything we know about Trump.
It doesn't know it's nothing we've known in American foreign policy.
Yeah,
Okay. You get beat. Vietnam, you get beat. Okay.
yeah,
You didn't make a choice. You got beat there. Okay. Afghanistan, similar circumstance right there.
yeah.
But George is right. I mean, we don't like Zelensky. We don't like the waste. Okay. But Putin will win.
That's right. That's what they'll say. Putin will win. And said, is that what you want? And he's not going to say, well, I don't mind, because that's just, it's just not, in his DNA. He's somebody who wants to be a winner, and he wants America to be a winner. It's when America lost in Vietnam. That was a different time. I mean, this was in the 1970s. A lot of deep demoralization that had taken place in the United States. But even so, that was still a colonial war. I mean, you say, okay, well, it was a colonial war. We can't go on fighting a colonial war forever. So yeah, let's just pull up our stumps and go home. You can't do that in the case of Russia, because then you say, well, you do realize that this will be a defeat for NATO, a victory for Russia. The entire post-Cold War order will have been shattered. That all these things that we've done, these alliances we created to box Russia in, to have a supremacy, a global supremacy, all that will have gone, will have be shattered. You do realize that, don't you? And I think Trump will just say, yeah, hey, I can't sign on to that. I'm going to continue with what we were doing. It wasn't that bad for us, bad for them, but it's not really that bad for us. Whereas if we sign a deal that seems like an American defeat, that will be bad for us. That's why I don't think he's going to do it.
I have to agree with you, George. I have to. I've long said that, they'll try to come up with some kind of marketing gimmick. Well, at least he didn't take Berlin, and the Ruskies aren't in Rome, and they're not having tea in the French presidential palace. I mean, they may try that, but and on top of it, as much as I really want this thing to come to an end, I really truly do, because I think it never should have happened. But do you think that uh, Pete Hegseth wants to be the Secretary of Defense when Putin won? Do you
Yeah.
think Kelsey Gabbard wants to be over DNI? You want to be, you're the one that was, see, you see how it's called politics. It's cheap. But that's how it works, everybody.
Right.
That's how it
Right.
works.
No, that's right. And ultimately, it's you always have to make the decision. You will accept things if the alternative is is so terrible. But in this case, it hasn't been that bad for the United States. It's it's Americans say, well, we're doing okay. Our economy is doing well. Our military industrial complex is humming along nicely. We're not losing lives. Americans are not getting killed. So why not keep it going? And
Yeah,
that's why.
But George, on the other side, as Russian forces continue to move west, okay? And so, what are you going to do about it? You're
Right.
gonna,
Well,
I
that's
mean, and
yeah,
this is,
yeah.
I had this argument with Chris Hedges and Alistair Crook, and they tended to disagree with me, to be honest with you. But I think that escalation is still very. I mean, if you're making a deal, you come in with your maximalist demands, okay, and then you figure out the other side, you feel them out, okay. But you've got a whole cadre of people behind you. Is that if you take one step back, it's over, okay, and that's why. And I truly, truly hope I'm wrong. But that's why I still think escalation is still part of it during the current administration, and it could be the opening gambit of the next one.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. I think that's why I think that's a likely scenario. I mean, I think that what is likely to happen is Trump will put forward a peace plan. And I think it will be rejected. I think we know the outlines of this peace plan, which is basically freeze the conflict in place, and then the NATO membership, okay, that's going to be put on the back burner. But in the meantime, America's going to keep pouring in weapons, arms and shells and everything into Ukraine, which means that from Russia's point of view, that it can be started up again within 5 or 10 years. And so Russia, I think, will say no. I mean, I think because then Russia will have achieved nothing. I mean, it's essentially you still created an anti-Russia on our border, and we can't have this. And so Russia will have accomplished nothing. I think Ukraine will also feel, hey, we're kind of losing all this territory. I mean, but admittedly, it doesn't matter too much what Ukraine says. But I think Russia will not accept this. And then what does Trump do then? And I think then Trump escalates. I don't see any other option for him.
Unless, and I hope people give me credit for saying it because I've been saying it for a while. There's a way out. It's not what the neocons of the present or the neocons of the future, meaning in January, would agree to, but call it major global timeout and say we need a pan-European security conference. All are invited. All will be treated equally, and we have you resolve it from the outside going in. Okay, now there's a lot of moving pieces there. It's very, very complicated. I'm not 100% sure it would work, but it would be worth trying. And Trump could look good that way. Okay? But I don't see anybody around him saying that. Okay.
Exactly. But that's really the point, because I mean, remember in his first term when he decided that, hey, he was going to resolve the problem with North Korea. He took bold steps to do it. But whom did he ask to implement this plan? John Bolton. Well, John Bolton wasn't going to implement this.
Okay. Well, using my example and George's example, what Trump should have done is called the Russians, called the Chinese, maybe the Japanese, but certainly US, Russia, China, and have the two Koreas at the table and say, we're all here.
Right.
What are we going to do? Because the status quo isn't acceptable. We need to this war technically is still on. It's only been a ceasefire. Yep. Let's end it. Trump would have gotten 10 Nobel Peace Prizes.
Right.
You know what? I think the Russians and the Chinese would have worked with him. I do.
Well, I think so. But what was necessary in that case would have been a step-by-step process, because you have to, first of all, build trust. You can't just simply demand, right, North Korea gets rid of its nuclear weapons. I mean, that isn't going to happen. I mean, they've invested a lot of time and money and made a lot of sacrifices to have nuclear weapons. They're not going to give them up unless a lot of things are done for North Korea, namely normalization of relations, security for North Korea. So it's a long step-by-step process. But once you go in with the attitude, "Hey, give up your nuclear weapons," well,
no.
No, I know. I'm not
agreeing with you. But what I'm just saying is that if you had made it a international, global endeavor, and the ultimate goal would be the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, including Americans' weapons. Okay.
Right.
But what I'm just saying is that the post-war American attitude
Right.
it doesn't allow for that, okay? Because then it's an admission of the limits of your hegemony. And,
Right.
even Trump has a hard time dealing with that, okay?
Right.
But what I'm just saying that the paradigm of mutual respect, we don't agree with you what you say about your interests, but we respected the fact that you believe you have them,
Right.
okay? You have to start that way.
No, I agree.
You can't go from the get-go delegitimize your interlocutor.
No, I mean, I think that's right, and I think that, but I think it's going to be so difficult for NATO
Oh, of course. Yeah, that's right.
and that's why I watched that crosstalk that you had with and Chris Hedges and Alistair Crook, and I was, you were absolutely right, and I think they were wrong. I mean, the idea that somehow Trump is going to, do this, and this, which will obviously be seen as a defeat for NATO, that everything that NATO had done, and not just a defeat for NATO, the whole NATO project, the whole post-Cold War project. I mean, everything will collapse.
And George is right because they have made it that way.
Yeah, they
They
made it
have
that.
made this craven choice. It's all or nothing.
Right.
They made that
Yeah.
choice.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that's why I think it's just so unlikely to happen. Now, there's a possibility that Ukraine could militarily collapse, a complete collapse in Kiev. But I think if that were to happen, I think NATO could then step in. I don't think they would just. I don't think they would just stand by and allow sort of Russia to take over. I don't know, but I think that
Well,
they
and but
wouldn't allow a complete collapse.
I'm not sure. No, I don't agree with you there. And that's a really scary prospect because I do not. I just can't see German and French troops willingly wanting to go into that. Okay, but it doesn't mean that NATO doesn't have assets, American assets, to keep the conflict going. But that would mean a general war.
Right,
Okay,
that would be general.
and that's not impossible. That's not impossible.
Right, but that's why I think that if there were on the brink of collapse, there would be some kind of I don't know, NATO would take over in Kiev, or some sense of that. Hey, we're maintaining a form of government. I really don't think that they're just going to stand by and allow Russians to march into Kiev.
I just don't. What I think is that I don't think they would do that. I think Ukraine would descend into absolute chaos. I think it could turn into a civil war.
Yeah,
You got to
but
remember, everybody.
that's
You got to
another thing.
remember, everyone. There's a lot of money slushing around.
Right, but that's why I don't. If that were to happen, I don't think NATO would just stand by and allow that.
Okay, well,
That would be again.
we're going to disagree on that one.
Right. Well,
Okay. But that's something, make a mental note to everyone.
mental
Okay.
note.
Because George, I will now be talking about if that prospect happens. At this point in time, to the last leggers out there, Ukraine is not in a state of collapse.
No,
Okay, it's not. Okay, is it losing ground? Yes. Are desertions up? Yes. Finding men to fight hard? Yes. The economy in tatters? Yes. The electricity grid in tatters? Yes. NATO still interested? Yes.
yeah. No, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, that's right. So yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
the problem with the reason why George and I are talking about this, obviously, we're thinking about the incoming Trump administration, and I'm glad we had this last part of the conversation because most people are not talking about the reality on the ground, and that is a very important element of all of this. Will that make its way into the Trump orbits thinking? I don't know. I doubt it. Okay, I don't know any of them that know much about Ukraine at all. Do
I
you?
don't think so. I really that's another aspect of this that very few of them have really taken any particular interest in Ukraine. I mean, their focus has been the Middle East. That's what the wars in Iraq, the wars in Afghanistan. That's really their background. I can't think of any of, and then you got Marco Rubio, a fairly routine kind of Cold Warrior.
Good
Um,
word, routine. Yeah,
yeah,
garden variety.
yeah, that's right. So I don't really know anybody there with any particular interest or knowledge of Ukraine. Again, if you had someone like McGregor would be obviously a sensible voice in those quarters, but I haven't heard anything about
Wilkerson would be someone that would do that.
exactly. But if the rumors are true, if they're really going to hire Dr. Sebastian Gorka, that, I mean, that so it's almost like, it's beyond parody. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, he's the type of guy, if they're going to hire him,
Yes.
he would open his office in Kiev.
Yes.
Okay. And he'd
Yes.
walk around with a sidearm. Okay.
That's right.
Of course, he probably would love the uniform too.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, this is cartoonish now. And this is
I
mean, Hegseth, he looks like a choir boy next to Sebastian.
That's right.
Sorry, doctor.
Doctor. Yeah. This is a man whose hatred for the Russians is not based on any personal experience. He was born in the UK. I mean, yeah, his family left Hungary in 1956, but for him, Putin is the Soviet Union. Putin is the KGB. It's the people you need to kill. I mean, that's his attitude. He's quite open that that's his attitude. Now, you don't want. It's like, you don't want a lunatic like that anywhere near the seat of power. I mean, just like you don't need people who, shape Middle East policy according to God gave this land to Abraham. These are nuts. You can't have nuts.
Yeah, these are what did they call them? They call them bar bulls, or what do they? You go into your corner pub and it's the same five guys sitting on stools every single night. Okay, Sebastian Gorka's got the corner one. Okay, he's there every night and he's railing about Putin is the KGB.
Putin's the exactly.
Putin actually, after a couple of strong drinks, Putin actually invaded Budapest.
That's
that.
Right, exactly. Putin was there. He was like, yeah, he was there. He was there.
Yeah. I saw him. Okay. We're making jokes about it, everybody, but it's on par with what these people think of the world. That's why it's so. I never thought we'd be talking so many hours about Trump's picks. Okay,
right.
I mean, when Biden, we never did one podcast on Biden's picks.
No, exactly, because they were remarkably
mundane normies. Yeah,
exactly. Mundane, and we kind of knew what to expect from this team, and that's what we got. I mean, this is a team that we expected, but this is. I mean, you've got these people, and you have to say, well, this is what we would expect. But the problem is, and this is why we're having these discussions, is that Trump has kind of given a signal that that's not what he wants to do, and that's the sort of peculiarity of Trump, is that he says one thing and then he hires people who seem to be have a very different agenda in mind. I guess
we can parallel it to his life. He built a lot of buildings, but he went bankrupt a lot. I don't know.
Yeah.
When I was at work, when the first appointments came out, I was asked, so Peter, what do you think? And I said, well, I'm not panicking yet. Okay, so I don't know when the panic is going to start setting in. Okay, but one thing is for sure, and we can end on here because it's 8 o'clock in the evening my time. Solving Ukraine is not going to be done in 24 hours.
No, it definitely isn't. Trump, you have to say politically, he handled it very skillfully during the election. Never spelled out what he intended to do. He just said, hey, I'm a deal maker. I can make this go away in 24 hours.
And we liked it.
Yeah.
We liked it because that's retail politics. That's what retail politics is all about. I'm going to solve this problem. Okay.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's it. Because, hey, I'm a deal maker. This is what I've been doing all my life. And nobody really asked, yeah, but you didn't do it during your first term. I mean, you said you were going to solve all these things, but you didn't actually. You said you were going to leave Syria. You didn't do it. Said you would leave Afghanistan. You didn't do it. And you said you would improve relations with Russia. You didn't do it. You said you'd have the deal with North Korea. You didn't do it.
Said you
But no,
would build a wall.
yeah, exactly. So you didn't do it. I mean, you can talk a great game. You're very good at that, but you didn't do it. And I think that's that. But the people were just swept up in Trump's ebullient, exuberant personality, and wanted to believe something. And something it's a human trait. You want to believe that he can pull this off.
Yeah, Donald Trump, you have good reason to smile. The greatest political comeback in American history. And you did it with margins. Undeniable, undeniable.
Yeah,
Okay. This will
right.
go down in the history. Your election will go down in history.
Yeah. No, no,
Now,
no.
the rest of your legacy is still very much
Very, yeah.
play.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe one day, much further out from now, he won an amazing election, but he had a failed presidency.
That could, absolutely could be, and and you could be like he won two extraordinary elections.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. I
yeah,
agree with you.
yeah.
The two wildest political outcomes in American presidential history. I mean, Harry Truman, he was, when he won, he'd been president for
Right.
a whole term minus 82 days,
Yeah.
okay? And and that was an amazing comeback, but that doesn't even compare to what Trump did in 16
No.
and 20.
No. Nixon had an amazing comeback, but Nixon had already served in Congress. He'd been, he'd been a congressman. He'd been a senator. He had been a vice president. He came very close to winning in 1960, and
He did win in
he did
19.
win exactly. But he came back in '68, and that people thought that was quite an extraordinary comeback because it seemed like he was done. But Trump's is quite it's really amazing. This was his first elective office that he ran for in 2016, and he pulled that off. And then he was done, finished. He was over and managed to come back. It really is just an extraordinary performance.
One of my colleagues at work, she's on maternity leave, but she messaged me on election night, and she has some friends, Russian friends that live in Chicago. And she wrote me, she said, all of my friends say Trump is going to blow this thing out because they don't know anyone in Chicago that's going to vote for Harris. This is going to be a blowout. Okay. Of course, George and I are very far away. I have a special angst about that woman that did that Iowa poll the day before, a
Oh
week.
yeah, 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 yeah.
I hope people look deeper into
That was very, very, very peculiar thing. This is a pollster. This isn't, he won Iowa, I think, by 13 points. So she's 16 points out. Now, what are you doing being a pollster if 2 days before an election you're 16 points out? I mean, you really should take up another line of work. So that was, but I always, I mean, I did think he was going to win. I thought he was going to win comfortably because I looked at the polls, and the polls just suggested to me he was ahead in the, slightly, but nonetheless ahead in the battleground states. He was ahead slightly nationally, knowing how the Trump voters are reluctant to talk to pollsters. So I had to think, yeah, he has to be ahead. I mean, there's no way. If it's neck and neck, then he must be ahead. Because in the case of Hillary Clinton and in the case of Biden, they were both very far ahead in the polls, and one lost a very close one, one won a very close one. So you have to think, well, that means the polls underestimate Trump's performance by 4, 5, 6 points. That was my assumption.
Actually, that's what ended up being the difference in popular vote too.
Right. Yeah.
So that was a national poll that actually reflected, and you only look at a national poll after the election. It's
Yeah.
worthless before. Anyway, we covered a lot of ground here. I think we're taking a very sober
Yeah.
view of things
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Actually, I didn't finish what I wanted to say. Is that Trump, you've got a big smile on your face. January 20th or 25th. It's,
It's
it's
gonna
pretty.
be, yeah, that's right. That's the thing, is because by then the election will be long behind us. No one's going to care about about the election. It's going to be
And we may know, we may have an inkling of the counterattack from the liberals and the
right.
Democrats, because I don't know about you, George, but I'm just kind of dumbstruck. I mean, it's like I know it's coming, but
Yes,
why this lull? It's a
right.
weird moment.
Well, I
Okay.
think one line of attack will obviously be the deportations. They're all getting ready for this. All the Democratic governors, they're absolutely determined they're not going to cooperate with the federal government with the deportations. I think these lawyers, they're all getting ready to file lawsuits to prevent deportations. That's going to be one line of attack. But I think the Israel thing will be next. I mean, if it really does, Netanyahu will take it. Hey, we've got Washington now in our corner. We can let fly. Boom, that's going to be on Trump right away.
Yep. I have a lot more things to say, but I have to take the dogs out. So
Understandable.
this is
Yes.
our Sunday wrap. We'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock Eastern time for our live stream, and George goes solo on Tuesday.
Tuesday, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join us tomorrow. Come with comments and questions. We love listening to your questions. We love answering them. It's always, we find it stimulating and intellectually challenging. And, that's a homework assignment. Come up with some good questions. And we can see here that Buddy is increasingly dissatisfied, and he's making his feelings known. Phew, boy, he kind of scares me.
Big Chihuahua. Big
Yeah,
Chihuahua.
Chihuahuas can be quite intimidating. So if you have a few bob in your pocket, whip them out, dunk them in the tip jar. That'll calm him down. This is winter in Moscow time, not a good time for Chihuahuas. So we're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology, and we'll be able to somehow subdue these ferocious dogs in the meantime. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.